I read 14 books in the 15th and 16th weeks of 2026, so let's go over my thoughts and ratings. I am combining these 2 weeks because I've been really busy. Life's been cuckoo bananas. This is just how it has to be. The Ending Writes Itself by Evelyn Clark is by authors V.E. Schwab and Kat Clark, and they co-wrote this together. It is a thriller that follows 6 authors who have been invited to a private Scottish island of a popular author who has passed away, and they are told that they have to compete with each other to ghostwrite his final chapter of his final book. They, of course, will win a lot of money and a publishing deal. But this friendly competition isn't so friendly, and people start to die. I really enjoyed the premise of this book, and I loved how each of the different authors were for different genres, and I also really loved the setting of this Scottish island. I thought it was so immersive and atmospherically dark. There were a few plot points throughout that really surprised me, and I also really enjoyed the commentary on the publishing industry. I thought it was really on the nose. That being said, I have to admit that for the bulk of this story, I was rather bored. While I think that each of the characters were well developed in who they are and what they stood for, I just had a really hard time connecting to them, and that kind of took me out of the story. I've actually never read an Agatha Christie novel, but anytime a book is described as for fans of Agatha Christie novels, I tend to not really enjoy the vibe of them. I do have to add that I did enjoy the social commentary on the advancement of technology in the publishing industry and in the art space in general. I thought that was very interesting and very well done. I honestly think that this book will speak more to writers than to readers because it does talk about the publishing industry and all of the struggles and frustrations that go into getting published. Not to say a reader can't enjoy those things, I just think it'll be a little bit more satisfying for a writer. I will say I really did enjoy the ending. While I didn't think that it was necessarily shocking, it was one of those, of course that was the ending type of moment for me. It was really bleak and yeah, ultimately satisfying. Overall, I thought this was solid, but ultimately didn't stick out to me, and I'm rating it 3 stars. These Familiar Walls by C.J. Dotson is a horror book that follows a woman named Amber who moves back to her childhood home where her parents were murdered. Told in then and now timelines, we follow Amber in her childhood where she meets a neighbor boy named Nathan, who is seemingly a psychopath, and then in present day, as Amber and her husband and her children move back into the home and believe it to be haunted. With themes of grief, manipulation, childhood trauma, toxic relationships, and repressed memories, we uncover the truth about what happened all those years ago and how it's affecting present day. Right away, I had a theory going into the story, and I ended up being right. This book does do something that I just really don't enjoy, and I think that it relied on this thing a bit too much to pull off the twist. I think had this aspect been approached differently, it would have hit for me a little bit more. That being said, a lot about this book really did work for me. There were a bunch of different paranormal scenes sprinkled throughout that I thought were creepy and unsettling and really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed the flip-flopping timeline. I thought they were expertly placed to maximize the unfolding of everything going on. I also enjoyed the characters and how well fleshed out they were. While they were unlikable, it was in an intriguing way, not in a, oh my god, I actually just really hate this character. I was intrigued by them. I wanted to know what was going to happen with them. I was invested in their story. Overall, aside from my one pet peeve, I really thought this was a haunting and intriguing paranormal read, and I rated it 3.5 stars. Odessa by Gabrielle Sher is a historical fiction horror that follows a Jewish family in the height of the violent pogroms against Jewish families in Russia. In this story, the violence gets too close to home and our FMC Yetta is unalive. Her family then decides to turn to dark ancient magic to bring her back, and she returns, but isn't quite the same. This was a brutal psychological slow burn. It explores themes of stolen bodily autonomy, systematic hatred, control masquerading as love, dysfunctional family drama, and deep power imbalance. I really enjoyed how Jewish folklore was weaved into this story and the complexities of Yetta's condition and how those complexities were revealed to us. It was psychologically mind-boggling while simultaneously being darkly haunting and emotionally charged. I thought this was very well written, and while the action scenes can be quite intense at times, they never felt forced or out of place. I really appreciated the ambiguity in the story. I felt like it just added a layer of unease that just made things a bit more creepy. I also really appreciated the dynamics between the characters and this dysfunctional family and the way that they use each other and abuse each other throughout this story. Just was absolutely brutal. I thought this was a very good read, and I rated it 4 stars. Who Knew the Ridpath Girl by Stacey Johns is a psychological thriller that follows a YouTuber named Grayson who one day reveals that his young sister many years ago passed away under suspicious circumstances and that he believes he has finally gotten to the bottom of what actually happened to her. This reopens some old wounds and things go south pretty quickly. We have multiple POVs in the story, one following Grayson as he is looking into his own claims. Then we have one from Dougie all those years ago. We also get one from Dougie's non-binary imaginary childhood friend Quinn as they confront what happened all those years ago. We also get a detective POV that is looking into a string of unalivings in present day. Throughout this story, we are pulled in multiple different directions as we have POVs from people with contradicting beliefs of what happened. I will say that pretty early on, I had my theory really solidified, but it was the why of it all that really kept me invested. And while this is a pretty thick book, it truly didn't feel like it. I was able to just fly through this. I also really appreciated the queer rep in this book, and I thought that the characters were well fleshed out enough that I was able to mostly root for them. With themes of guilt, grief, childhood trauma, dark secrets, and familial bonds, I was pretty invested in this story. That being said, I wasn't obsessed with this read. It does this one thing that is kind of a pet peeve of mine, where you get all this information and you're wondering, how does this all connect? How does this all connect? And then the revelation is just info dumping on you at the end and explaining all of the questions that you acquired throughout reading it. And I don't know, that's just not something I typically love. I also will say that I thought that things relied a little bit too much on coincidence, which is becoming more of a pet peeve for me. But overall, this was solid, and I rated it 3.25 stars. Dark is When the Devil Comes by Daisy Pierce publishes on April 28th, and this follows a woman named Hazel who moves back to her hometown in the wake of her divorce. She's going there and she's going to reconnect with her sister Kathy. So Kathy, of course, is very confused when Hazel never shows up. It's not a spoiler to say, as this is revealed very early on, that Hazel has been kidnapped and she's being held against her will. So this is a held captive, investigative style thriller that is blended with this kind of supernatural horror. Got this sort of local legend that is woven into the psychological state of somebody who is being deprived of the outside world. My biggest qualm with this story is I felt like it was maybe trying to do too many things at once. It just had a lot going on that at times I felt it was a bit convoluted and I wasn't sure which of the aspects of the story I should be paying most attention to. And some of the elements honestly kind of felt a little bit unnecessary. Overall, I was really entertained by this story and it was easy to fly through. I'll definitely be checking out more by this author in the future. I rated it 3.5 stars. Scorpion Deep by C.G. Drews publishes on October 27th, and this is a YA horror that follows a young boy named Jonathan who lives on this small, gloomy isle. His friends are about to leave for college, and he's kind of lied and said that he is also going to college with them, knowing that that's not true. So he's really stuck in this rut of figuring out what his life's purpose is, and he inevitably awakens an eldritch sea god called Scorpion Deep that is thought to be a legend by the locals. In true C.G. Drews fashion, this is a YA fantasy horror that blends in some queer romance with prose that is absolutely delectable, just like all of their previous novels. Right away, we are thrown into the psyche of our MC, Jonathan. He is so relatable, and he's just this outsider and he just really doesn't know what he's going to do with his life, and I just think that that's so easy to relate to. This is a haunting yet enchanting read with emotional depth as deep as the ocean. Sorry, I had to. It's beautiful, equal parts gut-wrenching and heartwarming. Blending together a story of revenge and obsession with longing and madness, I just thought this was expertly crafted. While I'm not typically a YA reader, C.G. Drews has quickly become one of my favorite authors. I have loved every single one of their books, and while this one is technically my least favorite, it still is so incredible and I loved it very much. I rated it 4.25 stars. House Haunters by Casey Jones publishes on October 6th, and it follows a TV producer named Grace and a ghost hunter named Frank with an adorable sidekick corgi named Fishstick, who team up together to make a smash hit reality show. They get together to film a concept video for the network, and things take a nightmarish turn. This was so charming, which is a really weird way to describe a horror book, but it just felt kind of familiar to me because as an Oregonian, this book is set in Portland, specifically the Mount Tabor area, which I'm very familiar with. And so I just felt right at home with this book. I felt like the characters were so well developed. They each had their own individual quirks that bounced off each other in such an authentic way. The unsettling oddities of Frank's character paired with the skeptical but morbid curiosity of Grace's character just really scratched an itch in my brain. That element of the corgi Fishstick just really did me in and stole the show. This was a fast-paced, haunting, mind-boggling, just chaotic, good paranormal read. While this is a pretty paranormal forward read, there definitely is the TV production side of things, so we get a little bit of that Hollywood mindset and the puppeteering of it all and the advancement of technology taking jobs that just really irked me in all the ways it was intended to. I would absolutely love to see this turned into a movie. I kept picturing Alison Brie as Grace, and I just think that it would be great on the big screen. I hope that can happen. I rated this book 4.5 stars. I loved it. The next two books I read as part of the Best or Worst Horror Books reading vlog, and they were The Other People by C.J. Tudor and Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Huang. If you're interested in my thoughts on either of these books, you can go ahead and watch that reading vlog. It was posted not too many videos before this one. But I rated The Other People 3.5 stars, and Immaculate Conception I rated 4.5 stars. Dear Mother by Rhea Frey is a psychological thriller that publishes on April 28th, and it will be available on Kindle Unlimited. This follows a woman named Isabel who, in the wake of her mother's passing, decides to confront what happened all the years ago that her foster siblings died in a fire, as she no longer believes that her mother is responsible. If you know me, you know that I'm just a sucker for when a character has to re-examine something that happened many years ago and relive those things. With themes of found family, child neglect, resilience, guilt, dysfunctional parent and child relationships, dark secrets, and mental illness, this book was so dark and thrilling. This is told in then and now timelines, and we unravel what happened to Isabel's foster siblings all those years ago, and I have to say the ending was super satisfying for me. I'm pretty good at guessing twists, so while I wasn't totally blown away by the reveal, I definitely was really satisfied with where everything went. This was a really good read, and while I wasn't totally obsessed with it, I just definitely think it's worth your time. I rated it 3.75 stars. Keep Them Close by David Ellis publishes on June 30th, and this is a psychological thriller that follows a woman named Allison and her brother Luke, who have been through a lot together. Allison has really been struggling in her marriage, so when her husband Finley winds up dead, she finds herself in very hot water that threatens to expose her and her brother's secrets. In true David Ellis fashion, this is a very multi-layered thriller. There are multiple POVs and timelines and just so much going on. Throughout the story, we have to piece together how an assault, a decades-old accident, a drug bust, and an affair all connect to Finley's murder. I thought all the characters were so well fleshed out. Throughout this story, I was changing my opinions on each of them, and I think that really speaks to the complexity of which they were crafted. With themes of manipulation, betrayal, revenge, and dysfunctional relationships, I was absolutely gripped by this. One thing I'm kind of noticing about my taste changing is I'm getting a little bit tired of things relying a little bit too much on coincidence. Not to say that I felt this book relied too much on coincidence, but there is one element of the story that I did feel that way about, but I wouldn't say it really hindered the reading experience all that much. Overall, this is another hit by David Ellis, and I rated it 4.25 stars. 3 Reasons for Revenge by Dervla McTiernan publishes on June 4th, and this story opens with a woman named Alexis walking into a police station to report an assault. Shortly thereafter, 3 different people at 3 different homes receive identical looking packages with gifts tailored to the recipients to cause them harm. Throughout the story, we are following Sergeant Judith Lee as she's investigating the connections between these 3 people and how it connects to Alexis walking into the police station to report that assault. This was mind-bendingly gripping. It was one of those books that I picked up and just did not want to put down. It was utterly gripping and just so good. It was devious and twisty and diabolically unhinged. It is just one of those very good revenge thrillers. I really enjoyed how this book sprinkled in twists throughout and revelations throughout. Like, it wasn't just like all these things happened and then it's explained away at the end. We slowly reveal what's happening and everything clicks into place with the final piece of information, and that just scratches an itch in my brain. I love when thrillers play out like that. I really don't have anything negative to say about this book. I'm tentatively rating it 4.5, maybe 4.75 stars. It just doesn't give me that 5-star feeling exactly, but it's still so incredible. The Neighbors Are Watching by Aggie Blum Thompson publishes on June 30th, and this is a suburban set psychological thriller that follows the neighbors of a small community near DC. In this story, we are mainly following 2 characters. The first one is Karen with a C, and she attends a neighborhood party and then wakes up with no memory of getting home, but there's evidence that she had a okay normal night. But she feels that maybe she was slipped something. Then we have Finn, and Finn is a new neighbor in town, and he is there to uncover the truth of what really happened to his murdered friend who was once a resident there, whose case everyone seems to have pushed aside. These 2 team up to solve each other's mysteries. Throughout the story, we are introduced to an array of neighbors who all have their secrets and their motives, and we slowly uncover which of them knows more than they're letting on. This book has some great queer rep that I really appreciated, but I will say, it does kind of lean more into the rich people of it all than I prefer my thrillers. As you guys know, I'm not a huge fan of the rich people behaving badly trope. I don't mind if characters are rich, but when it starts getting into the money-motivated aspects, I kind of check out, and this one did do that a bit, which isn't my favorite. That being said, I just love a messy suburban set thriller, and You Deserve to Know by Aggie Blum Thompson was one of my favorite reads last year, and so I was very excited for this book, and I decided to trust the process, and I'm ultimately glad that I did. I thought this was pretty multi-layered and twisty and engaging, and I was able to just fly through it. Though it does play into the money motivations and pulling strings and using money to get ahead that isn't really my vibe, overall I did think this was a solid thriller. One thing that really worked for me was the reveal for the murder investigation. I was absolutely satisfied and ultimately blown away with how that all wrapped up. Very good. I rated this book 3.5 stars. Dig by J.H. Markert is a supernatural horror book that follows the residents of Crow Island, where 8 years ago a boy named Jericho picked up an axe and slaughtered a dozen people. In present day, Jericho's dad starts digging, and it causes this kind of ripple effect, and everyone starts compulsively digging, and they slowly uncover these sinister truths buried deep in the soil. The premise of this really intrigued me, just this collective sense of madness that's accelerating and driven by an unknown force. I just thought that was so original, and I was very intrigued by this. I do have to get an ick out of the way. There is a very popular fantasy book written by a TERF author that is brought up in this book once. I just think it's entirely unnecessary, and I really wish that authors would stop putting that in their books. Other than that, I thought this was really good. I thought it was unique and intriguing and haunting and dark and very unsettling. One thing I especially loved was the folklore element that was introduced. Specifically, there's this mythological creature that I have seen people do their interpretations of in other books, but I really liked how it was approached in this story. I thought it was just so well done and really interesting and creepy. While I think the characters were very well developed, I have to say I wasn't particularly drawn or connected to any of them, and really what kept me engaged throughout this story was the plot. The ending of this book is bleak and ultimately satisfying, while also kind of being ambiguous enough that it could potentially have a sequel. Overall, a really enjoyable read, and I rated it 3.75 stars. Thank you so much for watching. My favorite book that I read in the 15th week of 2026 was Scorpion Deep by C.G. Drews, and my favorite book that I read in the 16th week of 2026 was 3 Reasons for Revenge by Dervla McTiernan. Please let me know in the comments what your favorite books were that you read in the last couple of weeks.